Let's get started. So welcome to today's Parrot Analytics Live. We will be discussing mastering streaming economics, making sure that we're covering the key insights for entertainment executives. So I'm Renee Engelhart, and I'm joined by my colleague, Brandon Katz. And for decades, television success was often seen as kind of in a black and white. Either it was a hit or as a flop. But in today's streaming landscape, that picture of what defines a success is far more nuanced, and it goes much more beyond viewership numbers. So it's really all about understanding how content drives subscriber acquisition, how it can shape retention, and generate sustainable revenue. In 2024, as the industry was navigating these evolving business models and shifting viewer behaviors, a lot of the leaders turned to us, Parrot, to decode those streaming economics. So whether you're analyzing how much subscription revenue Moana drove to Disney Plus, or how many subscribers Apple TV Plus gained from the instigators, or global revenue generated by Spain originating content, these economic performance insights are really critical to streaming success in 2025 and beyond. And at Parrot, we've developed a solution to assess both the macro platform level view of those streaming metrics, revenue, churn, subscribers, growth, as well as the ability to dive into title level valuation and contribution of those metrics. So today, Brandon and I are going to hit three main topics, looking across increasing streaming revenue with AVOD models, reducing churn with bundling strategies, and drilling down to that title level contribution. We'll then open it up for a Q&A. So please put any questions that you have in the chat. And then we'll also have the questions that were submitted earlier via email. So Brandon, welcome. Let's dive into our first topic. So in your experience, how are we seeing ad-supported models becoming a critical growth driver for streaming platforms?
Yeah, so just to start off, I fully recognize that everyone who doesn't work at Netflix is probably tired of hearing about Netflix these days. Even Scottie Pippen understandably got bored talking about Michael Jordan at a certain point. But because Netflix is the market leader and it is an SVOD still in the relatively early years of transitioning to AVOD, they provide a clear roadmap of learning. So for this first section, we're going to look at how they have delivered growth through their ad-supported tier in Q3 of last year. So obviously, ad-supported streaming is becoming a critical growth and revenue driver for platforms. Netflix has leaned into this model by sunsetting its cheapest ad-free tier, steering users toward its ad-supported plans, and instigating strategic price hikes to do so. This approach not only diversifies revenue streams, but also makes streaming more accessible to price-sensitive audiences. In fact, markets with ad-supported plans accounted for roughly 50% of Netflix's net subscriber additions in Q3 2024, significantly outpacing growth in non-ad-supported regions. This highlights the growing importance of AVOD in driving sustainable growth, and the less expensive ad-supported tier has provided a new entry point for more cost-conscious subscribers and a clear transition point for extra members caught up in the password-sharing crackdown. So ad-supported markets have helped dominate growth in recent quarters, accounting for nearly 90% of Q3 net additions, with 5.68 million subscribers added compared to just 508,000 in not ad-supported regions. So what is driving this? Ad tier markets are effectively engaging older audiences. So in these ad-supported markets, millennials and Gen X plus make up 78% of viewership, compared to only 57% in other markets. Now, this highlights a key strategy. Ad-supported plans aren't just about affordability, they're about meeting the content preferences of older, more diverse audiences. And as those audiences transition away from linear, ad-supported is obviously a very familiar model and structure that they are comfortable with.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you raise about the content preferences, which I think we'll get into later when we show some demographics of some various shows, but understanding and knowing who is that audience of your ad tier versus the SVOD subscription tiers, I think that's really crucial to then knowing how both you're going to retain and acquire more subscribers.
Absolutely. You have to have a strong grasp on that. Now, this slide starts to get into it a little bit. This shows the power of local language content in driving demand in ad tier markets. So on the left, we have markets without ad-supported plans, about 30% of all subscriptions in Q3, and we're seeing strong growth driven by English language titles, with a clear positive correlation between demand and subscriptions. But on the right, in ad-supported markets, which are making up about 70% of these subscriptions, English-speaking titles don't drive the same growth. Here, local language content takes center stage, fueling subscription increases and catering to regional tastes. So the key takeaway here is that success in ad tier markets, outside of the US, of course, depends on going local. Platforms that embrace regional content are better positioned to grow and retain audiences. We're also even seeing this as Disney Plus dips a further toe into local language content over the last few quarters, more so than early on in their run. So it's not just a Netflix positive strategy, it is working for many other SVODs.
Yeah.
So building on the importance of local content in ad tier markets, this slide highlights just how critical it really is at the bottom line. On the left, that we see that while only 5 to 6% of available movies and TV shows on Netflix's ad tier are local in these regions, their impact is disproportionately high. So local titles, despite, again, being just a small part of the overall catalog supply, play a key role in driving subscriptions. On the right, the data shows that for every 1% increase in demand for local language content, there's a significant boost in subscription growth, 0.38% for movies and 0.5% for TV shows. So this suggests that platforms looking to maximize growth in ad tier regions must prioritize localized programming. Even a small investment in local language content can yield outsized returns in both demand and subscriptions, making it a cornerstone of any successful AVOD strategy. So local content doesn't just perform well, it also helps accelerate growth. Here we see that local titles make up only about 4 to 6% of originals and licensed catalogs, but their impact is, again, outsized and undeniable. So for every 1% increase in local demand, subscription growth jumps up to by about 0.49% for licensed content and 0.23% for originals. So the takeaway here, again, investing in local content, whether through licensing or original production, is a proven driver of growth in ad-supported markets. And we can zoom out and just look at a typical historical consumer viewing behavior. Everyone prefers to watch content in their native language. That doesn't mean they aren't going to sample content that falls outside of that language sphere, but it does mean that that is far more often than not going to be the first choice as soon as that user logs onto that app.
Now, when it comes to original content, because that's something that we often associate more so with the paid tiers, should there be a different strategy with original content and budgets that are going behind generating and creating original content with the AVOD strategy versus the paid tiers, or can they apply the same type of strategy to both of the tiers?
I think it does depend on the individual goals of a streamer. And I'm a big fan of not saying that there's a winner take all in the streaming wars, because every platform and every company has various goals and ambitions. I do think one consistent through line right now, as most of the major players in the market expand to include a lot of local language and non-English content, is figuring out a way to get that non-English content to resonate more in the high-yield UCAN region that usually boasts the highest average revenue per user. Because the more a platform can do that, the further they can stretch their content budgets and more efficiently. So one reason why the return of Squid Game to Netflix is such a huge deal isn't just the viewership and engagement and demand that it generates for Netflix for that specific title. It is the greater opportunity for a user to finish binge watching Squid Game and say, you know what, I think I'm going to stick with Korean dramas and sample The Glory, or maybe All of Us Are Dead, or maybe even Extraordinary Attorney Woo, which is a personal favorite of mine. The more they can get Western audiences to do that, the more bang for the buck they're getting. And that isn't just a Netflix strategy. That is the hope of Amazon, Disney, and all these mass market streamers that are starting to push more and more into non-English local language content around the world.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so now let's shift gears. We were just talking a lot about really acquisition of subscribers, but now let's talk about churn reduction strategies. And churn is really another one of those key streaming economic metrics. So as we see platforms to continue to mature, what trends are we seeing with churn, and what moves are platforms making to help combat subscriber churn?
Yeah, Renee, churn is the dirty word in streaming, as everyone knows. It's the common cold of streaming. Everybody is impacted by it, and there isn't necessarily one surefire cure. But Netflix, again, is unfortunately for the rivals, market leader in churn rate across every major market, unsurprisingly. Here in this chart, you see their churn rate in major markets versus the next closest competitor, and clearly they have a lead. Globally, Netflix's churn rate hovers between 2% and 3%. According to Parrot Analytics' streaming economics, far better than the industry average, which hovers between 4 and 6%. Unfortunately for the competition, not everyone can maintain those same levels of retention. As such, the remaining major players need to seek out alternative strategies for reducing churn as the longer you keep a subscriber on the hook, obviously, the more their lifetime value increases. And there's a few key strategies to doing that. So number one, we can see here kind of consolidation from Q1 2023 to Q3 2024. Both Hulu and Disney Plus have seen a decline in UCAN churn. Why? Well, there's many reasons across content, pricing, and beyond. But one of the largest contributing factors to that declining churn rate is the consolidation of both catalogs onto one app in order to create a more seamless, convenient, and streamlined streaming experience for customers. So in March of 2024, Hulu was finally and fully integrated into Disney Plus in UCAN, which has helped with the service's ability to keep you on platform, as we'll see in the next slide.
Oh,
So,
is this the right slide, Brandon? Yeah?
yeah, I think we're one back, actually.
Oh, there you go.
That one, sorry about that.
Okay.
So this slide measures the percent of people who remain watching other content on platform after tuning in to watch something. So in other words, as of Q1 of last year, 13% of Hulu viewers stayed on platform after their first watch, while 10% of Disney Plus viewers stayed on platform after their first watch. So we projected at that time that the combination of Disney Plus and Hulu would lead to a greater share of on-platform engagement. And we've seen that borne out in the last slide that we just showed you that shows that retention is indeed improving. And so there's a very clear reason as to why this combined catalog of programming is doing a better job of engaging and retaining subscribers than each individual catalog was doing on its own before the consolidation. So here we see Hulu original series tend to draw an older and more female audience, while Disney Plus original series attracts a younger male audience. Hulu is also the go-to destination for next-day air of many hit linear shows, while Disney obviously boasts a deep library of blockbuster programming. They have an unrivaled war chest of franchise IP. Now, together, they create more of a four-quadrant service that more evenly appeals to men and women, old and young. Again, as opposed to the more segmented audience demographics that these platforms served on their own. And that brings us to another key point about churn reduction, and that is how you integrate content and what is the ultimate kind of bundle approach. Now, bundling obviously is an age-old strategy that many have kind of derided in the last 10, 15 years as we've shifted to this a la carte streaming ecosystem, but it always provided immense value. It's a good thing for the consumer. It's a good thing for the provider. And the industry has somewhat done a disservice to itself across the whole space by pushing that to the side. So to that end, complementary content bundles in which the consumer gets more bang for their buck is a strong way to reduce churn. The Warner Brothers Discovery Disney bundle features very little content overlap, as you can see here, between the three distinct libraries. So Hulu and Disney Plus only have a 1.6% overlap. Disney Plus and Max only have a 0.2%, and Hulu and Max only have a 2%. So this is about getting, again, complementary cross-company bundles of content that make it very easy for the consumer to access at a very streamlined, reasonable price. Max brings prestige drama through HBO in a tidal wave of unscripted laundry folding shows from the Discovery side. Again, Hulu has some female skewing originals and a lot of great linear licensed titles, and Disney brings the blockbuster knockout franchise power. Together, they form a bundle that helps reduce churn and gives customers what they want in a convenient, seamless, affordable location.
I think one question I would have is at what point does that bundling start to cannibalize the efforts that are made to really carve out and define what each of these platforms brand is? What type of content are they known for that audiences can always count on? Because I think it could be easy to swing the pendulum too far to the left or too far to the right, where you either have too niche of a content or too broad of a content that it starts to lose the identity.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I feel like at this point, Netflix has successfully made its no brand. You know, it is the Walmart one-stop shop of everything. Not every service can do that. And not every service can be so general entertainment to the point that it risks losing something that makes it distinctive and differentiated from its competition. So in this example, with the Disney Warner Brothers Discovery, I think each brings something to the table. So Hulu, in addition to its linear programming and its female skewing originals, has Animehem, and that hub is dedicated to animation and Japanese anime, which really is a loyal, consistent, passionate audience that doesn't necessarily have dedicated hubs outside of your Crunchyroll, even though it's a major investment genre across the field. As we said with Max, I think that's probably best known for HBO. Now, combining does risk potentially watering down certain brands, but as long as discovery and on-platform marketing is highlighting the unique hubs of content, you can work around that. And I think we have a savvy enough consumer base that ultimately knows what they're getting into when they sign up for a Disney Plus at these days. You have a pretty strong brand image attached to that.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's keep it moving. So then we've been addressing a lot of these macro level trends or platform level trends as they relate to streaming economics. But how can these be translated down to the title level? So how can we measure consistently across platforms how a title contributes towards revenue? So let's dive into that a bit more.
I think this is genuinely one of the most important and overlooked elements of the industry today. Raw viewership will always be the overarching goal of every film, every TV show, every TikTok even. But in our increasingly digital ecosystem, success is really not quite as linear as it once was. And yes, that terrible, awful pun was most definitely intended. There are several metrics to consider when evaluating performance today to better understand how a title is contributing value and how you can create the right combination of attributes to build a balanced and effective library. So here, as you can see on this slide, acquisition, retention, and engagement are the three ways in which Parrot primarily measures the value contribution of a title. Acquisition, understandably, measures new subscribers who sign up for a service, and it's often influenced by the introduction of compelling exclusive content or new releases. Retention is measuring existing subscribers who renew their subscription, who stay on the hook as paying customers, indicating the continued appeal and value of the service's content over time. And engagement assesses how effectively a title can capture viewing attention and drive revenue through advertising, reflecting its capacity to sustain viewer interest and ad impressions. Obviously, that one has grown in importance as every major streaming platform shifts to AVOD and basically steals the old linear strategies of old and just grafts them onto their internet delivery. What is old is new again, always in the entertainment ecosystem.
And so at Parrot, just to provide some clarity, so we are able to provide the dollar value revenue contribution of every single title and then provide that breakdown of how much of that revenue was attributed to acquisition, how much was attributed to retention and engagement. So let's look at a few examples with that.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite slides that Renee put together. I absolutely love it. I always tell my clients, this type of stuff is the nerdy homework that I love to do. So if you ever have any questions, please come to me. This slide shows some of the most effective revenue-driving TV titles to Peacock and to Hulu in the UCAN region in Q3. And what you'll notice is that these titles contribute value in different ways. Sometimes they are most effective as acquisition drivers. Sometimes they are effective in two of the three categories. And sometimes they're balanced across all three. So Parks and Rec, for instance, my personal favorite sitcom of all time, it doesn't necessarily draw a ton of new signups for Peacock, but it is one of the top revenue, it's one of the top five retention drivers on the service, responsible for an enormous amount of continued viewing and resubscription. Futurama does a little bit of everything for Hulu, particularly after returning with two new seasons after years off the air. So Hulu is able to kind of make it an event return, a legacy return for a beloved show that really generated enduring appeal over the last decade plus. So
And one point I would just add to this is this would look quite different, or it could look different if we were to look at Q4 or Q2, given when new seasons launch, when new shows come out. I'd assume that acquisition retention share might be different and might be, and I think we've seen this in a lot of our data, that the acquisition share would be higher when it comes out initially. And then as it becomes more of the library, then the retention share drives a bit more.
Sorry, I just see a quick question here. Yes, Danielle, we will be recording this and sending a recording of this session in a couple days. But yeah, so the point is that knowing a TV show or a movie is watched a lot, it's just not enough to guarantee success today. What greater insights do you learn from me telling you that Friends is popular? We know Friends is popular. We need to know how it's popular and how it's contributing. So instead, we have a firm grasp of the specific types of contribution a title provides in order to optimize content slates to balance acquisition, retention, and engagement. And the final element of this is understanding who is watching.
And before moving on, one other point I just want to raise is, so with Grey's Anatomy, that is also available on Netflix. And so even though I know the answer, I'll pose it as a question. So Brent, how would these numbers look or change potentially for Netflix platform? Would it still be a 7%, 93% composition breakdown, or could that be different?
Yeah, so Grey's Anatomy is one of my favorite case studies that we have in all of Parrot's exhaustive, robust data. And it's because, again, the same title can contribute different value to different services. So on Hulu, it is an unbelievable retention driver, and that's likely due to the fact that A, it has significant consumption affinity with Hulu's library, which means people that watch Grey's Anatomy also watch a lot of shows that are on Hulu. And Hulu is the, again, next day air location for Grey's Anatomy's new, most recent linear episodes. On Netflix, Grey's Anatomy works a little bit more as an acquisition driver because it has a bank of the entire series. So viewers flock to Netflix to catch up on old seasons before new seasons, or just frankly love putting on Meredith Grey in the background and all the tragedy that unfortunately befalls her across 20 seasons.
Yeah, so basically what we're saying is that a show's value, both the revenue contribution, the dollar amount, as well as how it drives value, is going to vary, most likely platform to platform, country to country.
And so rights holders need to know basically the different avenues with which non-exclusive licensing or exclusive licensing can generate revenue and maximize your opportunity, particularly if you're talking about awareness and revenue and reach first revenue. It is a labyrinth that we try to help navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here, Renee, one of the coolest things about this is the first thing you might notice about this chart, at least for me, is that the vast majority of titles over-index with younger audiences. And more specifically, there's just one show here that resonates mostly with slightly older male viewers. So understanding who is watching your big titles is absolutely imperative to not only unlocking the full value of AVOD, but to ensure that you're doubling down on your core audience demographic and then ensuring that they stay on the hook while simultaneously, strategically, and carefully broadening the appeal of your service. So this is great for a title level, but on a platform level, which we'll see in the next size, it's absolutely crucial for healthy longevity.
And I think on this slide, I just changed it to the platform level. It's interesting because this is how a lot of us would probably anecdotally look at and think about the audience and the subscriber base of these various different platforms, where Netflix really is the closest thing to being a four quad service. But I think on the previous slide where we showed the different titles, it shows that there still is a lot of variety in the age demographic. So as we can take starting at the title level, aggregate it to the genre level, different release years, seasons that are being dropped, we can then really understand where is the revenue coming from and where are there opportunities for continued revenue to grow, so that we can then understand, okay, overall at the platform level, where are those audience segments really performing and which ones are contributing the most revenue.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Renee.
Yeah, anything else to add to this slide or?
Yeah, I mean, you'll note here Apple TV Plus overwhelmingly over-indexed with older male viewers. And again, it is okay and in fact important to have a core demographic that you service with consistently appealing programming. So Masters of the Air, For All Mankind, Slow Horses, these are all examples of Apple series that I think could be classified as dad TV in that demographic. But you unlock greater value by strategically engaging new audiences, which leads to better advertising opportunities, more on-platform usage, and improved lifetime value for customers. So it is about striking the right balance, which is really hard to do if you don't have a strong grasp of A, who your audience actually is, and B, what else your audience is interested in.
Yeah, and one thing I do just want to clarify on this chart is that it is a bit zoomed in. So it's not that Apple TV Plus is so far to the older male audience. We just have the zoom in so that you can see the scale of how these platforms are shown relative to each other.
Yeah, and we break it down by basically four demographics: Gen Z, Zennial, Millennial, and Gen X plus. And when we break it down by percentage, you'll note that each four are much closer than I think this graph gives credit for. But this is their core main audience, which again gives them a brand identity, but also gives them a clear road to strategic expansion and broadening.
Hmm. Okay, so those were the three big topics we wanted to address, more so about acquisition, retention, and then at the title level. We're taking a quick scan through some of the questions, and we have a few from the emails from earlier. So we'll start with one of those. And Brandon, so I know you're also a big sports fanatic. So where do you see sports fitting into this picture of streaming economics and just the streaming frontier overall?
Yeah, I'm a long-suffering Washington Commanders fan who just couldn't be more ecstatic and elated with our season, and we're going to win on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles. Absolutely no apologies if there's any Eagles fans on this call. But yeah, sports obviously play an extremely key role in the future of the streaming ecosystem. In the last few years, we have seen more and more sports rights migrate over to streaming as these leagues attempt to maximize revenue by including a lot more. Yep, bring on the hate, Matt. I'm okay with that as as these leagues bring on more and more sports rights bidders. What is important to note, though, is I think Netflix has actually done a really good job of meticulously building out the back end of its funnel with its library of one-stop shop, something for everything licensed and original series before dipping a toe into the very costly world of sports rights. And so they have enough of a back end to keep these users who sign up for NFL football or WWE programming or Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul to keep them and not suffer massive churn like we've seen elsewhere. You know, across the sports ecosystem, it has been reported by Bloomberg and others that a lot of these really expensive sports streaming exclusive sports rights have been loss leaders. And again, that's okay if you A, have the financial runway to do so, and B, aren't necessarily concerned with retention and engagement and are really focusing on acquisition. But as we've seen, the road to a healthy, balanced, longevity as a profitable service is a balance between acquisition, retention, and engagement. And so strategically understanding and constructing a library that appeals to these new incoming sports fans and will keep them on in the off seasons or after the one-off events is critical to maximizing the value of these sports rights.
Yeah, I do personally think that live sports really is that next wave that's going to be capitalized on. And I think from a Parrot perspective, we also have sports demand, which is coming very soon in the next month or so, that it will be considered essentially a third category where we have TV, movie, and then sports. So as our analytics and our research continues to mature with that, I think we're going to start seeing sports alongside the numbers being reported for TV shows and movies as well.
Absolutely. And I think as we see regional sports networks or RSNs continue to decline, you're going to try to see FASTs and SVODs competing for that local regional focus and seeing who can kind of crack that. Because as of right now, FAST has more of a regional focus, whereas SVODs clearly have a national and global emphasis. So that balance and finding a symbiotic relationship will be really interesting in the future.
Yeah. We've got another question. So, how do these calculations vary when looking at the US, global, and other international regions? I can kick this off, but when we do our calculations, we take into account the specific streamers and content that is available in that market. So, it all starts at the market level and then can be aggregated to regional and then global. So, each of these are really bespoke to the region and the competition that exists there and the platforms that exist there as well. But Brandon, anything you want to add regarding US global versus international analyses and how we look at that?
Yeah, I think you said it best, and I think it harkens back to a little bit of what we said before, in that each streamer is trying to get their local language international content to resonate more in the highest ARPU regions to help create more of that balance, to help minimize cost. Because generally speaking, international production is less expensive than US-based production. And I think that actually segues nicely to a interesting question from Matthew here. To what extent do streamers have the ability to set genre trends themselves instead of relying on pre-existing audience preferences? For example, Squid Game bringing a demand for Korean foreign language content. So yeah, that's a great question, Matt. And I think what we've seen too is that streaming has helped a little bit fill a void for genres that have fallen out of favor in linear TV in the box office. So I think Netflix's slate of really effective, cost-efficient rom-coms in the 2010s was a great example of how they can, I don't want to say revive a genre, but certainly fill a void that has been missing from what we would consider traditional entertainment. And all it takes to set a trend is one hit, one breakthrough. I think Squid Game is obviously a great example of that. But I also think Stranger Things helped kick off this wave of 80s nostalgia that we saw really permeate much of the entertainment industry for the ensuing 5 years after Stranger Things debuted. So yes, of course, audience familiarity and IP that doesn't require a heavy marketing lift will always be really, really important and cost effective. They want a guaranteed high floor of audience. But no one could have told you Severance would revive the kind of mystery thriller genre. It's a on paper very esoteric series, and yet obviously critically acclaimed and growing in demand week after week in its first season, and really looking like a breakout season too. So quality dependent, but also marketing dependent and trend dependent based on traditional TV and film as well.
And I think that's a great segue into this one last question. And I apologize, we're getting some great questions in, but some of them we will be sure to reach out and answer afterwards, just because I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them. But Brandon, so on the vein of movies, so how will the changing theatrical release landscape and how movies are being made for theaters, which ones are actually going to theaters, which ones are going straight to streaming, how will movie strategy combined with the theatrical release strategy play out with the streaming metrics, subscriber growth, acquisition? So how, from a theatrical release to streaming,
Sure.
how does that play with everything?
Yeah, and according to our data, we've seen that big films coming to streaming on a regular cadence do provide a pretty consistent pop of acquisition power. And we interviewed Casey Bloys, head of HBO and Max, in 2023 for Parrot Analytics' annual Global Demand Awards. And he even said that theatrical movies arriving on the service in their pay one window are usually the first choice of a user that's logging on to Max or HBO Max at the time, I believe. So clearly there is significant acquisition power and significant demand drawing power from films. And we have seen and have pretty ample evidence as well that films that receive theatrical rollouts and the subsequent marketing that requires tend to do as good or better on streaming than streaming exclusive films. That doesn't mean a streaming exclusive film can't break through. Carry On Netflix is a huge Q4 release for them last December. But it does mean, I mean, look at something like Red One that I think relative to its budget, disappointed a little bit in theaters, but is absolutely killing it since it arrived on Amazon Prime Video. So that will continue to be a really, really key strategy. And I think people underestimate too the new to Netflix users audience. So there is ample evidence of films that perhaps disappointed at the box office over the last 10 years, but arrive in some sort of output deal on Netflix years later and pop right then and there because the Netflix audience, and particularly cord cutters who are only subscribed to Netflix, hasn't seen it before, but was aware of it because of A, the star, and B, probably the marketing campaign that resulted a few years ago. So films will still be really important. TV shows offer more bingeable units, more hours of consumption, more opportunity for advertising, but don't discount film's power on subscriber revenue and growth.
Yeah, that gets me excited for all the different types of analyses we can look at and how we can slice and dice the data to understand what is that contribution of movies versus TV shows, how is that evolving, and really what is the driving source of revenue for these platforms globally. So great topics. And I want to make sure that everyone feel free to reach out to me or Brandon or really anybody that you know at Parrot. We're happy, of course, to continue the conversation. If we didn't get to your question, we will be sure to follow up in email or if we want to set up a separate call. We did record this webinar and we will be emailing out the slides for you as well. And I really hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank Brandon for his fantastic strategy conversation discussions. Always a great discussion with you, Brandon. So thank you to everybody today. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Brandon or anybody at Parrot.
Yeah, please don't tell my boss, but I'd much rather answer your questions than do some other work.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day.